Chapter 7. I Say Goodbye to Mrs. Sullivan. Lars and I walked back to my car. I started my engine. I pulled back onto the road and drove toward Washington Street. "We'll have to tell Detective Oakes what happened," said Lars. "Otherwise, that poor woman will be charged with Bogan's murder." "How will I explain it?" "Just tell Oakes the truth. You were working on a case. It led to here. Andy Bogan kicked in the door and chased you with a knife. It was self-defense."
"But he was shot in the back."
"Then you'll have to tell him that it was me who fired the gun. I did it to save your life."
"But we don't have the gun."
"That, Loris, will present a problem."
"Then they'll find out the real Asa Wilkes is some dead guy buried out in Pittsfield."
"Maybe we better just leave town."
"What about Vi Bogan?"
"We'll save her. We'll just have to do it miles from here." I turned north on Washington Street. "Where are we going?" asked Lars. "I thought we were leaving town."
"There's something I must do before we go. Can I borrow $500?
Lars opened his wallet and handed me 5 $100 bills. I drove to Cottage Street and parked.
"I'll be just a minute,"
I told Lars. I left the engine running and got out. I knocked on the door to 9 Cottage Street. Mrs. Sullivan answered.
"Is your husband home?"
"No," she said.
"Can I come in for a few minutes?"
"Sure, Mr. Wilkes. Is anything wrong?"
I sat with Mrs. Sullivan at her kitchen table.
"I apologize for calling so late," I said, "but I needed to say goodbye. I won't be able to solve your case. Take this money and use it to pay the blackmailer."
"Mr. Wilkes, we can't take your money."
"It's the only way I can save you."
"No, Mr. Wilkes, I can't take this."
Mrs. Sullivan tried to give me back the money, but I wouldn't take it.
"In a few days, Mrs. Sullivan, you'll hear my name mentioned. Many disparaging things will be said about me. They'll probably be true. I only did what I did because I wanted to help people."
"Mr. Wilkes, are you in trouble?"
"I will be if I stay in town."
"Did something bad happen tonight?"
"Yes, a man named Andy Bogan was killed."
"I knew Andy Bogan. He married my friend, Vi DeMonico. How did Andy Bogan die?"
"He was shot."
"Where?"
"In his house. The police think Vi did it. Detective Oakes just arrested her."
"Detective Oakes is my father."
"Oh?"
"Did Vi kill Andy?"
"No."
"Who did?"
"I don't know."
"Andy Bogan was a wicked man, Mr. Wilkes. I never speak ill of the dead, but I'm glad he's dead. I hope he rots in hell."
"Did Bogan have enemies in this town?"
"Everyone hated him. He was a horrible person."
"That might help explain why someone shot him."
"I wonder why my father thinks Vi did it."
"Do you still have that picture?"
"The one the blackmailer sent us?"
"Yes."
Mrs. Sullivan left the kitchen and returned with the picture. I examined it again. I verified that the photograph was taken in Francis Gilligan's bedroom. I also noticed that Dean Sullivan's eyes were open, but barely. The woman in the picture looked like Vi Bogan, but then again, it might have been someone trying to look like Vi Bogan. I gave Mrs. Sullivan back the picture and stood.
"I best get going," I said. "If I call on you periodically, would you be willing to fill me in on what's happening here in town? I might have to return and save Vi Bogan if she gets put on trial for murder."
"Poor Vi. We were best friends once."
"Do everything you can to convince your father that she's innocent."
"I'll try."
I left. Before leaving town, I drove 2 streets over and parked near a big white house.
"I need to grab some clothes,"
I told Lars.
"I'll just be a minute."
I ran up to my apartment, threw some of my things into a small suitcase, and started to leave. Before I locked my door, I went back and opened the top drawer of my bureau. I lifted an old shirt. Under it was a manila envelope. This envelope contained vital documents belonging to the late Loris Harding. I didn't want them found if they searched my room. I tossed the envelope into my suitcase and left.